walking through this life of mine. Well, it's teaching me so many things, like how to love and how to lose and how to choose. Walking through this life.
Well, hello, this is Linda Carbonneau, and welcome to another edition of Walking Through Life. I'm really excited about my guest today. I have Senator Rick Brock, and he is running for the governor for the state of Vermont. So, Randy, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here.
Well, Linda, thank you very much. It's great to be here with you today.
Yeah, it's really nice when you can come and, have a conversation with people.
Sure.
You can't get out and see everybody all the time. I know you've been trying, though.
Oh, yes.
I've seen that. I know you've been trying to
I've
get out and meet everybody.
I've only got 312,416 Vermonters left to meet.
Well, that's not many, so they should line up and take that turn.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to talk a little bit about different issues that different from you and Governor Shulman and what you really would like to bring to the table. And we were having a discussion before. We were talking about people with disabilities going back to work and having employers to be able to hire these people. I think it's wonderful, and I think that employers would get a lot from hiring people with disabilities. What would you say to encourage people to hire people with disabilities?
Well, people who have disabilities also have abilities. And
That's
the key is to find out, well, what's their ability? There are so many jobs that we have in Vermont, and as I go around on factory tours, on visits to various businesses, I'm seeing more and more people who have disabilities, and sometimes you can see what that disability is, and sometimes you can't.
That's right.
But employers need to be open and need to understand that there are people who can do jobs, and maybe they're disabled in one way, but they can do a wonderful job in another way. And it's getting that match and making that match work. And I think the other thing is that for people who have disabilities, to encourage them to get out and knock on those doors of employers. And sometimes you'll be surprised. Vermonters are people who will give other people a chance.
And, I'm really encouraged about that because it is so true. I've seen a lot of people and a lot of employers in Vermont step forward and be, really, really happy that they've hired people with disabilities. Like last month we had the Governor's Committee Award winners for people that hired people with disabilities, and doing an interview with them, they all talked about, how great it was and the people that they worked with, and it became something that was worthwhile to the employer. So it's
a two-way street. It
Exactly.
helps the employer, but it also helps the employer. It helps all of us
Yes.
understand better our community. And, in terms of disability, no family knows when they're going to have a member of that family who becomes disabled in one way, shape, or form.
And, speaking as myself, being somebody with a disability, there's nothing like being able to go out there and work and earn a paycheck. I mean, I remember the first time I've ever gotten a paycheck, and I was just so excited because for so many years, doctors and teachers, you can't do it. And then to be able to prove that wrong, and I think my husband Ted says the same thing. He works at Price Chopper pushing carts, but he's the best one that does it. You know what I mean?
Good.
Yeah. So I'm glad you're really encouraged about that.
I'm encouraged, and I'm very supportive, and I think we should do all that we can to clearly what we want to do. And in this election, jobs in the economy, from my perspective, are really at the top of the list. We have to increase the amount of opportunity in Vermont, and although our unemployment rate is low relative to the rest of the country, it's much higher than it appears. And one of the things that's concerning is that our workforce over the past several months actually is shrinking. And one of the ways that our unemployment rate looks as low as it is because we have fewer people looking for work. And that's a concern because two things I think are happening, Linda. One, there are people who are getting discouraged and are dropping out of the workforce. I mean, we all know people who are unemployed and who've been unemployed for a long time, have been looking, and eventually they drop out of the workforce. And the second is we have so many people who would love to find work in Vermont, but who pack up and leave. And this is particularly true of our young people who graduate from school and who can't find a job, can't find a good job, can't find a variety of jobs, and leave for greener pastures. And that's what we need to turn around.
And how do you think we could do that? How can we get more businesses and more jobs for people here in Vermont?
I think there are lots of things that we can do, but I think we have to step back for a second and think about what government does well and what government doesn't. And I think the one thing that we have to really realize is that government doesn't create jobs.
That's true.
Entrepreneurs create jobs. And the job of government is twofold. One is to create a fertile environment in which jobs can grow. And second, it's to make sure that we have rules and regulations that are easy to follow, that are clear, that are understandable, and particularly, Vermont has always been noted as a very tough place to do business. We have regulations that are arcane, they're difficult to follow, they're confusing, they're lengthy, and we have processes that are painful. And we need to go and look at all of that entire regulatory structure that we have around job creation and business growth, and say to ourselves, look, we want a pristine environment. We want clean air and water. We don't want Vermont to look like New Jersey. I mean, that's why we live here.
Right.
And so it's not a question of easing up on any of our environmental requirements. It's saying that we ought to have both. We ought to have people, I had a guy, he came up to me not too long ago and he said, I finally got my permits for my new business and it only took me 2 years. Well, there's something wrong with that.
Yeah.
Because it shouldn't take 2 years. Our permitting should be fast, it should be clear, it should be understandable, we shouldn't have needless duplication, and it should be certain, it should be predictable. We should know what the rules are, and we should know that if you follow these rules, you'll get your permit, and you'll get your permits fast. And so one of the things that I think we desperately need to do is we need to look at all of our permitting processes and figure out where are the roadblocks. What's holding people up? I was down this morning in Springfield, and I was talking to some people about permitting and what their experience had been. And their experience is that, well, the process seems to work all right, except, well, I need this permit, and so this person inspects for this. And he was on vacation for 2 weeks, so everything stopped until this person came back from vacation. And then I had to go through this next step. And then that person wasn't available because he was overloaded for 2 weeks. And then suddenly, when you have things like that, a year passes. Yeah. And it's not that anybody's doing anything wrong or is intentionally delaying you, but we need we got to find better ways to do this.
Do you find that true too in like the welfare and Section 8s and all of that? Is that there's too many hands in the pot?
Well,
I mean,
yes,
you've got one person
that.
here that will take the information and write it down, and then they'll send it over here to be done by somebody else to be processed, filed, and then they'll send it over here for somebody to okay it.
Well, I mean, it is painful.
Exactly, and I think what you're talking about
is absolutely painful, and in some of the variety of things that I've done in my career have touched this whole issue of how do you get things done.
Exactly,
in the Army, one of the jobs that I had in the Army was as a management analyst, and that is to go and look at things and say, how can we make this work better than it can? And then in the corporate world, a period of time as a general auditor for a large financial services company. And again, it was, how do we get more value out of the money that we spend? And then I was state auditor here in Vermont, and I really focused on performance auditing. As we look at various things in government, what isn't working as well as it should, and how can we make it work better? Well, all of those things come together as I'm looking at what we need to do. And I look, for example, in our state agencies, a lot of times we have a whole bunch of silos. This department does that.
Yeah,
that department does that. This department does that.
Refer you
but
here.
You need a permit.
Yeah.
And you need something that touches all of those departments. How do you make that process cross those lines and work properly? And that you've really got to focus on how government operates. And there are tremendous opportunities right now, Linda. One of the big things about opportunities, I mean, we've got great state employees. You saw how some of them performed in Irene. You see, if you go to, somebody was telling me today that they moved up from Connecticut, and one thing they had praise for was the Department of Motor Vehicles. Yeah. Because it's so much friendlier.
That's right.
And easier to deal with. But our state employees do a great job, but in a lot of cases, they're hampered by processes that make multiple people handle the same problem over and over and over again. And we need to simplify that. And one of the best ways to look at that is we have a tremendous opportunity right now. That's one of the reasons I'm running now. Because we have a large number of our state employee workforce that's going to retire within the next 5 years. It's going to happen no matter what we do. Right. There's no better time to reorganize our state government, to make it more efficient, to make it more effective, to have fewer hands touching the same piece of paper.
Exactly.
But without having to lay people off. It's a great time to use the changes that are going to happen in our workforce anyway, and then instead of replacing each and every position, be very selective about what jobs we replace and then what new people do.
Right.
And I think there's a tremendous opportunity to win, both from Vermonters' standpoint, to make things easier and better, certainly for the people who are the first line people who deal with you over the counter. You know, you can have the greatest tone at the top of an organization, but if down at the bottom, the person who's interacting with you over the counter isn't clued in on the fact that your time is valuable.
That's right.
You know?
You'll
And
be
it
sitting
costs
on the
money.
phone for a long time waiting for, and not only that, but how can, that's what I never understood any organization or anything at all, is how does it make sense that you can talk to one person about something, they refer you to a different one, and the next time you call, you get a different one altogether, and it's just so confusing, you know?
I mean, it's certainly confusing for lots of people in dealing with state government. You know, I've heard some stories, for example, today about trying to solve tax problems. And issues with the tax department about things that sometimes get pretty complex. And folks who call with the same question who get different answers depending upon who they talk to. And those are things that we can deal with. Part of it is training. Part of it is orientation. Part of it is just how you have government organized so that it works more smoothly together. How you deal with processes so that work is simplified, so that you don't have needless duplication and repetition. But most of it is attitude. I remember...
you know, that reminds me of something. Attitude. And often you find people that have such negative attitudes. And do you know that's something that helped me recover, was turning my negative thoughts and actions over to a positive. So I like that point. And I think if you can get the people in the state to think about that, you know, to think about how can we turn this around to a positive.
Well, and you know, in a lot of cases, though, when the public gets a negative impression about an interaction with government, it's not that the employee is trying to be negative. It's just what he's taught to do. For example, in an enforcement kind of thing, you know, an environmental inspector or so, he's told his job is to make sure you follow the rules. But what really he ought to be trained to do is that my job is to help you follow the rules so that you'll be successful.
Big difference.
And the rules, and it's just the attitude,
absolutely.
and that takes leadership from the top to make sure that that approach, that attitude of why we're here and what it is that we want to do and how we're going to approach doing, that's infused throughout all of government. I think the other thing, though, is that we really need to concentrate on the people who are interacting over the counter or on the telephone with Vermonters. If you're going to do reductions, the ideal reduction is somewhere in the bowels of state government in the middle, so that you don't denude the ranks at the front line who have to deal with people, and make it simpler so that the interactions with people on the counter are shorter and more and cleaner and more distinct and less necessary.
Absolutely. And I was going to go, because you mentioned taxes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from what I understand, from what I'm hearing from a lot of people that I interview anyway, is that the taxes on the houses, the taxes on...
Property taxes.
Yeah, property taxes, concerned about electricity prices going up. And, you know, a lot of people, I guess, are selling their homes just because they can't afford it. You know, they can't afford taxes. Yeah. And that money
that's
does
a real problem.
Yeah, and it's got to come from somewhere, Randy. You know that.
I do, and I know that, for example, our tax rate on property taxes is up by 3 cents this year, but what I think a lot of people don't know is that the projection that we've seen from the Joint Fiscal Office is up 11 cents next year. Wow. Those are huge increases.
Yeah.
And part of the fact is we really need to reform our tax system. We need to simplify our tax system. You ask anybody to explain education funding, and nobody can really explain. Anytime you have a tax system that has to use the coefficient of dispersion as part of the calculation, you know it's too complicated.
Right.
And we did a study 2 years ago now, in which we had a blue ribbon commission that looked at the income tax and the sales tax. And they did very good work. They asked the right questions. They raised lots of good issues to go forward. But you can't reform taxes in Vermont unless you also deal with the property tax. You have to, because they all work together. Those are the big three taxes. And how they interact with each other is critical to have a tax system that's understandable and workable. And the legislature, in my judgment, failed because they failed to use the same method, a bipartisan method, to look at the property tax and education funding. They just looked at whether or not it fairly distributed the money, and I think it by and large does. But what they didn't look at is the structure of that tax and how it should relate to income taxes and sales taxes as to what part of our revenue should come from each. We also failed to look at what I call tax expenditures, and that's something we don't talk a lot about. There's a booklet about that thick of tax expenditures. Tax expenditure is where you use the tax code to give people money. Okay? And there's lots of tax expenditures, and often, you know, special interest group will come in and we need this exemption and that exemption, and the legislature on a piecemeal basis will do it. But the thing that you always forget when you do that is that every time you give a tax break to one group, you raise taxes for everybody else. Tax expenditures also ought to be looked at in this overall context. I mean, for example, do you know why we don't charge a sales tax on tugboats?
No.
I don't either. But that's an example of some of the stuff
yes,
that's in these tax expenditure
right,
budgets that we really need to look at. And on property taxes, the real question is we don't have so much a property tax system anymore. We have an income tax system that has a property tax component. Because with income sensitivity, you have a significant amount of people who get, in effect, their property taxes capped. And in some cases, either unfairly or with unintended consequences. And so I think we need to step back, we need to look at all of our taxes, we need to simplify them, and we need to make them understandable so that people, when they see a tax, know it's fair because they understand how it works. And right now, we don't have that.
No. And, you know, that encourages me to think about that too, is that, you know, there are so many people, especially here in the Upper Valley in Vermont, that, you know, I mean, like there's just so many closures of businesses and, you know, people moving away because of those taxes. And it's just nice to have somebody that's willing to come in like yourself and explain that and what's happening and what you would like to see done and how that's going to be, how you envision that being changed.
Well, Vermont is a high tax place. And one of the reasons
Absolutely.
that our taxes are so high, and this is a decision that Vermonters have made, is we're a high service state. And so that's part of the trade-off, is that the more benefits and other services that you provide to your citizens, somebody has to pay for them. And we have a very sharply progressive rate right now, and so those people who are wealthier do pay a much higher rate of tax, one of the highest marginal tax rates in the United States. Most Vermonters don't pay at that top rate, and it's understandable because most can't pay at that top rate.
Right.
And we have to do a balance, but at the same time, you know, we do have to ask ourselves, you look at something like Medicaid, for example, we've got about 24% of Vermont residents who get some form of health assistance on Medicaid.
That's right.
And just across the river in New Hampshire, 8% do.
Yeah.
And that's an effect on the tax burden. Yeah. We look at sales taxes, where Vermont has and you know it's certainly over here on the Connecticut River, a 6% sales tax rate, and New Hampshire has a 0 sales tax. And then all you have to do is drive up and down the borders, the highways on either side of the border, and you see the effect on jobs and on business growth, and that's something we have to recognize.
Now, going towards the people with disabilities or people on social services, well, whether it be welfare, Medicaid, or SSD or SSI, and so on and so forth. What do you see for changes there? What would you think would be good to change as far as a welfare system or anything like that?
Well, one of the things that concerns me is that we do have some folks in which public assistance has become a generational issue, in which we have people who are second and third generation welfare recipients, in other words, going on in families. And we've got to break that cycle. We've got to break that cycle, and nothing breaks that cycle more than jobs and opportunity. And so that's where, again, one of my focuses is we've got to increase the number of jobs, and those jobs can't be government jobs. You know, our growth in jobs over the past 10 years, such as it has been in government and nonprofit. And nonprofits do a great job,
Yes.
but what we need jobs in businesses that pay taxes and that add to our economic pie. We can't have an economic pie in which we spend all of our time simply cutting it up and deciding how to redistribute it. We've got to grow it and we've got to make it bigger. We need green jobs. Now, to me, a green job is not a job that is necessarily in renewable energy. A green job is a job that will produce one of these. That's a green job.
That's right. Yeah.
We need jobs that will produce business income and that will produce growth. And we need jobs in industries that are suitable for and are the kind of scale that we need in Vermont. And there are a number of areas in which we can grow jobs. Now, one of the big job growth areas, I think, should be financial services or other kinds of economic growth. We've done, as an example, the captive insurance industry, which is headquartered in the Burlington area, but there are captive insurance companies around the state. That's a great industry. It's an industry that is a niche industry. It pays lots of money. It's a high-paying job industry, and Vermont is the capital of captive insurance companies in the United States. And we did it because we're small enough that we can create a unique regulatory environment that is particularly suited to that industry. We can do a high rate of service because we can have very competent state employees who are the regulators, who know that industry, who know those rules well, and who are very, very responsive to the industry, so that when something needs a change, you don't wait on the phone an hour. You don't wait for a year for somebody to deal with your problem. It gets dealt with and gets dealt with professionally. That's the kind of thing that we can look for other industries in which we can do it in. And those are the classic clean jobs. A second job and industry that we can be focusing on, I think, is the food industry, because we have been historically an agricultural state, and I see that renaissance already happening. You look right now at the number of specialty cheese producers, for example.
Yeah.
Just as one type, you know, people who grow a variety of organic or other kinds of meat products that particularly use the land that we have and the processing plants that we have and could have. The University of Vermont in their spires of excellence, food production and the food market economy is one of them. And so that again is a great area of potential growth. Our proximity to Canada is another, in which looking at transborder issues and a variety of things associated with the fact that we have this huge market just a few miles away from us, particularly in northern Vermont, is again another area that we should look to. The amount of export that we do in Vermont, it's absolutely amazing. As I go around businesses in the state, you know, you think of, well, a state that does everything local. Well, we don't. We have industries that export all over the world. You take something like an IBM as a classic example. Do you know that IBM, the largest private business in the state, sells almost all of what it produces to China? I like to see things going in that direction rather than the other direction.
Exactly.
And Vermont does that and does it very well. We have a chocolate manufacturer in Franklin County that is one of half a dozen plants around the world. It's the most productive plant that they have in the world. And what that speaks to is our workforce. And Vermont is noted for having workers that are very high quality, very dedicated, long-serving, competent, and innovative. And that's what we need.
And do you think by all of us that have, you know, gone to these jobs and done this can pass that on to the younger people?
Yes.
And I had one more question just about healthcare too.
Yeah.
Now I know that the mental health services here have just got a big chunk of money, which is great, and that we're going to have some peer work, people with they can work with peers. And I just think, I mean, what's your opinion of people that that are consumers actually working to help out other consumers? What's your feeling with that, especially in the mental health field? Or
well, I think the key question is people who are providing the service, are they able to provide the service? Are they competent to provide the service? Are they properly trained to provide the service?
Exactly, there is big training in that.
And are there medical professionals who are overseeing the work to be able to ensure that the patient is receiving the kind of quality help that he or she needs in order to thrive and be successful. And so I leave it to the professionals in the field. That's their job to know how to do it, and I think that's the right way to do it.
Yep. And you know, one thing I'd like to say about peer services too is that we are highly trained when we do that, but also we have one thing that the professionals don't have is that we have relatability. We've been there. We know what that is. But don't get me wrong though, because everybody that does that sort of work, peer specialist work, or whatever, is trained. For a long
I think
period
is
of
the
time.
key. But you know, you touched, Linda, I think on a broader area, and that's the whole issue of when people have a problem, and that problem could be a disability.
Yep.
That problem could be being out of a job. That problem could be a substance abuse problem.
That's right.
It could be a problem of second, third generation welfare recipient.
Yeah.
Each one of these people has a unique problem, and that's a personal problem. And the notion of solving it with one solution imposed by government in Montpelier on everybody who has that kind of problem is doomed to fail. The key is to do almost what you're saying in peer review. You're working with one person to solve that person's problem, or with a smaller group of people. And at first blush, when you start thinking about why people are unemployed, everybody who's unemployed, everybody who's second generation welfare has some problem. Question is getting to what that person's problem is and working on trying to solve it. It sounds like you're going to invest more money to do that on the front end, but I don't think you are, because I think that's the only way you're going to solve the problem.
Yes, because who's better to help somebody that's in an exact situation that they used to be in, and they moved on, and they've got a job, and they've done all of this. They would be able to make somebody that isn't comfortable with doing that feel comfortable.
I mean, I'm really concerned, for example, about the person, and you know, this is what we see in welfare today, is a person is getting welfare benefits, and they finally do get a job. And as soon as they get the job, they lose all their benefits. Then they look at their take-home pay, and they find that they're earning less than they did when they were on welfare, and the incentive to stay employed goes away.
That's
right.
right.
We need to do some smoothing. Because what we need to do is we need to have both a carrot and a stick. The carrot is, if you work, you're going to do better. I mean, that's pretty basic. It's human nature. But at the same time, the stick is, there's a limit as to how long we're going to pay you in the event that you're able-bodied, that you're capable, that you can work, and if you don't work. And it's making those two things work equitably together, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And I think it's important, especially for people that not only have disability, but also people that don't have disabilities, that, like you say, have welfare and all of this, because that becomes their purpose. I mean, if they don't have to go out and do anything, or you know, if they don't have a job or whatever, the purpose becomes four walls, a TV, maybe a drink, you know, drinking or smoking or whatever.
Well, again, sometimes people have a problem, and that problem may be substance abuse, it may be alcohol abuse, and well, we need to help address that problem. But the point is that we need to end the problem. We don't need to simply paper over it or Band-Aid over it. We need to help them get to a solution, and that long-term solution is the ability to take care of yourself, the ability to have a job, to have an income, and to get people there is our biggest task, I think.
But I like your words on that, too. I'm very encouraged. And I know we're getting towards the end of the show, but I also would like, if you could, in maybe 5 minutes or so, maybe talk to White River Junction. Let them know, you know, some of your concerns or anything like that.
Well, I think that people always ask me, well, why are you running for governor? And I'm running for governor because you know, it's corny. I love Vermont. I've spent my entire adult life here, and it's a wonderful place to live. It's a place that I found very great to raise a family, and it's a place where I achieved what I believe to be the American dream. And I want to see other Vermonters be able to do that as well. I want to see a place where people who raise kids, that their kids don't have to go away to find a job someplace else, that they can find jobs and opportunity and a future and prosperity right here at home. And that means that we have to have an environment that is welcoming to new business and, above all, is also welcoming and helpful to the businesses and the job creators who are already here so that they're not looking for greener pastures. We need to look at tax systems that encourage growth and that encourage people to stay here in Vermont to make it worthwhile to do so. We need to look at a healthcare system in which people have the ability to control, 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 ability to control.